In a posh neighborhood of New York, David, wearing a weary military uniform, stood in front of a fancy restaurant. He was not even permitted inside. Above the entrance, a golden sign read, "Members only, a haven for the elite." His jacket and weary eyes stood out against the warm, opulent scene inside. Through the glass, he saw well-dressed people enjoying pricey meals, laughing and chatting carelessly. David inhaled deeply. He had risked his life in Afghanistan to defend his country and left everything behind to serve. But now the country he had defended would not even give him a place at the table. As he moved forward in the hopes of getting inside, a waiter caught sight of him. The man gave him a patronizing look before turning back to face the other patrons and gently gesturing towards David. A short while later, he stepped outside and said, "Hey, what are you doing here? Don't you know you're not allowed inside?" David slowly raised his head and said, "I just want a plate of food." The waiter laughed mockingly, emboldened by the eyes watching from inside, and he moved closer, pushing David's shoulder, forcing him backward. "This place isn't for people like you getting lost." When Trump briefly emerged, the whole scene froze. Trump looked around him, taking in every detail, including the worn military jacket, David's tired face, the silent humiliation in his eyes. And then everything changed. He stepped forward to close the distance between himself and David, and the waiter immediately stepped back, sensing the change in power. But David stayed on the ground, taking deep breaths. He was accustomed to the contemptuous glances from everyone around him, but today was different. The shadow of Trump's polished shoes stretched over David, and he slowly raised his head. He had seen men like this before, but those were military commanders. This time, it was a politician. "What's going on here?" He was trying to come inside, but this place isn't meant for people like him. The waiter stumbled, unable to find the correct words. Trump's face instantly tightened, his brows furrowed, and he leaned in slightly, his piercing eyes staring at the waiter and asking, "People like him?" The waiter went silent and looked around the restaurant for support, but there wasn't any at the moment. He decided that standing at Trump's side was the best course of action. David was shocked because he had been disregarded, ignored, and discarded for years, but now a powerful man was sticking up for him instead of ignoring or rejecting him. Turning back to David, Trump asked, "What's your name?" David, a former Marine, inhaled deeply because it had been years since he had heard kind words. For a minute, Trump's face stiffened and his eyes strayed as though he was remembering something from his own history. "How long have you been out here?" With the weight of his troubles bearing down on him, David let out a slow breath. "When I returned from deployment, nothing was the same. I attempted to work, but no one trusted me. So now I'm simply looking for food. Things didn't go well after I left behind a pregnant wife to fight for my country." For a man like Trump, transforming someone's life was as simple as making a decision. But for David, life had been a string of broken promises and closed doors. Trump's piercing eyes narrowed as he stopped in contemplation. "I fought for my country, but it feels like my country has forgotten me," David said, his voice faltering a little. After giving the waiter one final, silently critical glance, Trump turned back to David and said, "Come with me." For a brief moment, David wasn't sure if he was genuinely helping him or if this was just a cruel joke. But when he looked into Trump's eyes, he saw something unquestionably genuine, and his life took a turn he never would have imagined. For the first time in his life, he was sitting at the same table as a billionaire. They took their seats in one of the restaurant's most exclusive corners, and as soon as they did, whispers began to circulate throughout the room. Waiters exchanged bewildered looks, and some patrons wrinkled their noses in discomfort. At a nearby table, a couple whispered to themselves, "What's happening here? Why is someone like him dining here?" David's shoulders stiffened a little. He was used to this, but this time was different. A guy who had never backed down in front of millions of people sat next to him. Trump leaned back and said, "First, bring this man some food," gesturing to the waiters. People weren't used to seeing a man like him in a setting like this, so there was a moment of hesitation before the staff rushed to the kitchen. The tension in the room persisted, but Trump didn't care. A few minutes later, the food arrived, and David noticed that one of the waiters had placed a plate in front of him with hesitant hands, as if unsure if he should be serving him at all. As he reached for his food, he realized that his hands were trembling a little. It had been years since he had sat at a proper table like this. When he looked up, he saw Trump observing him intently. Then Trump said, "You fought for this country, but when you return, no one remembers you. That's not right." David paused mid-bite and slowly put his fork down, looking at Trump. "You know, Mr. Trump, when I went to war, I risked everything for my country. I put my life on the line without hesitation. But when I came back, my country forgot about me." Trump nodded, his expression turned serious. "This country cannot treat its heroes like TH. Trump leaned forward a little and put his palms firmly on the table. "This isn't just your tale, is it? How many more are just like you?" David smiled slightly, but his eyes were filled with unshed tears. "Thousands of people go hungry every day, and many more sleep on chilly pavements with no one seeming to care." Trump leaned back and thought deeply, his face tightened with resolve. "We're not just going to eat. We're going to make this injustice right." David blinked for the first time in years, seeing a glimmer of hope, but he still couldn't believe that Trump was actually going to help him. The restaurant had fallen into an uncomfortable silence, but Trump's words reverberated throughout the opulent hall, and soon that silence would be broken as the meal came to an end. Trump stood up, and David watched him closely, trying to understand what he was about to do. However, Trump didn't hesitate, walking straight towards the restaurant owner, who saw his approach, quickly composed himself and forced a polite smile. "Mr. Trump, what a privilege to have you here." His face stayed the same. "Why you treat soldiers this way?" The owner momentarily stopped. All eyes were on Trump, and the waiters were now observing him. This was merely a misunderstanding. "Mr. Trump, when this man fell to ground, nobody moved, and your staff didn't even bother to help him. How precisely is that a misunderstanding?" Trump shook his head, disgusted. The restaurant owner became alarmed because he had never thought that someone with Trump's level of authority would step in. "Your restaurant's name will soon be known for all the wrong reasons if your employees are so unconcerned that they would degrade a veteran." Trump turned to face everyone in the audience. This man defended this nation, and you all saw how he was treated. How many of you stood up for him? Some patrons lowered their heads in embarrassment, while others avoided making eye contact. No one raised their voice. The restaurant owner nodded anxiously, his face turning pale, and Trump said, "This will never happen again. If you or your staff ever disrespect a veteran again, the entire world will know about it." Trump turned to David. "Your life is going to change from now on, my friend." For the first time in years, David smiled with tears in his eyes. A few weeks later, David's life had truly changed thanks to Trump's help. He found a stable job and a place to stay. But the biggest surprise, Trump had an even greater opportunity for him. David was now the head of a new veteran support program. The project aimed to provide jobs, housing, and resources to veterans struggling after returning home at a grand event. Trump took the stage. Beside him stood David. "This man fought for his country, and we forgot him, but today change begins." David took the microphone, his voice steady. "For years, I served my country, but when I came back, I was cast aside. Today, I stand here because someone gave me a chance, but real change must come from all of us. Support veterans. Don't turn your back on them." The crowd rose to their feet, applauding. This wasn't just David's story, it was the story of thousands of forgotten heroes. And on that day, something truly changed.